Okay, good afternoon, dear audience. This lecture will be held in using the English language, not Hebrew. אחר הצהריים טובים, אנחנו נדבר באנגלית בנושא first contact, סדרה שכבר הבטחתי מזמן להקליט. So this is actually something that, the first contact series is actually a series that, started as a blog post from about 4 years ago, but I don't have it actually because I forgot to send it to myself in Gmail, something that I always do. But of course, I remember, the content, so it shouldn't be too difficult just to reiterate it just by, this time in a kind of, lecture form. I have done something like a rehearsal, that was not recorded about 2 months ago. It was a little more than 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, ביער מלכי נורווגיה, Forest of the Kings of Norway. It's near the Elvis Diner near Jerusalem. Just, a rehearsal to myself. I was just hiking. Hiking, I was homeless, Let's say it was hiking mostly, it was just that I was homeless. So, first of all, what does it mean, first contact? So, we speak about first contact as a contact between two civilizations. It's not a metaphor for sex. I know my audience, they are very sexually oriented. They always think there is some kind of, maybe some kind of a clue to something. What's the real meaning? What's the real meaning? No, so there is no real meaning. There is no meaning, not real meaning. So what's the meaning of first contact? So we will, for our purpose, we will actually stick to the way that first contact is both, depicted and defined in the Star Trek universe. Why is that? Because it's a known fictional universe in our time. So the starting point will be the first contact as is defined, by the Star, by Gene Roddenberry, like in the original TOS, and articulated and elaborated during the subsequent series and movies up until today. After I discuss this kind of thing, I'll discuss. What's the problem? That obviously exists with such an occurrence of first contact, and also another thing that should be discussed that goes end to end with end to end, first contact is the prime directive, again as defined in the Star Trek universe, because it's kind of I'm not like a Trekkie, it's not the Star Trek is not that important. Universe is not that important for our purposes. It's just that it's quite famous and it's a really cool topic in the series, so it's a very good starting point. But we will not just stick to Star Trek. We will actually later during the discussion we will actually speak about take examples and try to kind of see what we can learn from the examples from other science fiction works. This time not television series or movies, but actually literature, famous literature that deals with first contact and what we can learn from it. Now, I should say that this kind of discussion is very theoretical. Of course, the speaker myself, not David, not an avatar and not a clone. Come on, stop this stupidity. I myself am kind of like a first contact because I represent the Keops, קרובים, ציוויליזציה עתיקת יומין, and we already see that first contact is not always the first, because it's so just in a minute we will define what exactly is the first contact. It should be said that yes, I'm a first contact because I approach humans and speak to them, but this kind of lecture will not be will not focus on me being like a first contact and me speaking to you. Behold, listen to my words. I do it almost every day, but not in this kind of lecture. This kind of lecture is a theoretical, I would say, polemics with with various Star Trek, shows, and also classical, science fiction literature. We'll speak a little bit about Childhood's End of Arthur C. Clarke, his master voice of Stanislav Lem, The Left Hand of Darkness of Ursula Le Guin. Maybe we'll mention Contact by Carl Sagan. I think this will be sufficient, I mean, for us from the literary perspective. And again, the purpose is to kind of like discuss what's the problem with this thing and how can the problem be solved and how could you expect it to be solved. So we are kind of like in a priori mode, in a way that we do not discuss history or reality of a certain culture, that of the earth or any other culture, but we discuss the possibility and how can we expect such a thing to occur given the possibilities that we have in front of us. So maybe maybe we should read more than one like video. Maybe I'll just cut it like in the middle because maybe 2 or 3 videos, so it will be shorter, not to go much more than an hour for like the complete video, lecture, because it can be quite lengthy. But let's see how it goes. So first of all, let's discuss the movie. Originally, in the original post, like when I that contained pretty much the topic of these lectures, the blog post, I started the blog post with a description of an anecdote from my life, but this anecdote was actually later added. I mean, included like in another video, like in the Game of Thrones series, like the Game of Thrones early, like which I discussed my earlier years. As I think it's in the last chapter, like chapter 11, the תמונה impressionistic. So I kind of mentioned, how I kind of like, I participated in kind of like a miniature, modest like a trek con, like the year was 1996 with Lior Badichi, my friend, like in Konoha Tel Aviv, when we watched like a movie that is called actually First Contact, Star Trek First Contact. Relatively okay movie. I mean, for Star Trek film, it's like okay. So, but I mean, we will want to discuss this kind of like this movie, not because it's a masterpiece, but because again it's kind of like a pretext of the discussion, like more of an excuse, like to or a way to start the discussion, because it deals exactly with the topics that we want to demonstrate. So, what is the first contact? First contact is first meeting between two civilizations that did not meet before that. Now, what is the civilization? Civilization doesn't needs to be like a species or race, something like that. Presumably, first contact happened in Earth many times during the history of the Earth. Mostly typically between European settlers or colonizers or explorer, whatever you want to call it, in indigenous cultures. So this is like the typical first contact, and it was usually not always. It is actually it was the best kind of like the best kind of like I would say meeting between civilization. But we are not going to so I mentioned this issue because first contact is also something that happens in Earth, but this is not our discussion right now. Like we discussed like first contact in the interplanetary sense, and it's different. Like first contact in the interplanetary, like inside the planet, is mostly dealt with like through the lens of post-colonialism and issues like that. The problem with colonialism and post-imperialism, things like that. But this is not our topic. Our topic is first contact in the interplanetary sense, in which there is always one culture that is one side that is tremendously more advanced technologically than the other side. Because statistics, because, so why is it like that? because space is huge and there are many civilizations. Now, our universe, the universe of discussion, is similar to that of the Star Trek in a way that faster than light travel exists, and indeed it exists. And this is something that you should know. It's something that it's very relevant for the discussion. If it wasn't a thing, the whole still there would have been a discussion to be made regarding first contact, but it would have this would have been a smaller discussion, of less magnitude and more complicated, but also less important. But this is not the way that it's not discussed. It's not depicted like that in Star Trek, but moreover, this is not your universe. בחיים שלנו יש מהירות גבוהות. אפשר לנו מהר יותר מהאור. זאת עובדה. פשוט אתם צריכים להקל את העובדה הזאת, אבל זאת עובדה. וזאת עובדה חשובה, and we should discuss this fact in a bit. Now, given that the universe is that big, for almost all civilizations, it is true that they developed, let's say that they were organically developed on a planet. It's true that there were other civilizations that preceded them by tremendous amount of time. This is just statistical, fact. And if this civilization discovered this faster than light travel, and why shouldn't they? Then this civilization could have just contacted them at any given point during when their history. So, first contact in our sense is almost always, like in the interplanetary or interstellar sense, is almost always a meeting between two civilizations that, one side is tremendously more advanced than the other. Now, it's not exactly the way that this is not exactly like that is depicted in the Star Trek universe. And in that sense, the Star Trek universe is not realistic. This is done in order for dramatic purposes. They have also phrases like Ferengi, Romulan, and that are Klingons and humans that are all very, very much, very similar in their, they all have empires and they are all very similar. And this is kind of difficult to explain, as a matter of fact. And it's not explained very well in the franchise because probably it's just not realistic, so it cannot be explained very well. So it's not. But what is true but there is actually one point that is very important in the Star Trek franchise that should be a very important starting point for our discussion, and this is the issue of the Prime Directive. Because, according to Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek and the creator of the original series, and this is something that is maintained throughout the entire franchise, there is something that is called, yes, there are many civilizations. Most of them, many of them did not discover yet that faster than light travel. So they are, let's say, the inferior civilizations technologically, and there are others that indeed discovered this FTL, engine. So yes, presumably it's in the decision of the stronger ones whether they want to expose themselves, to any kind of inferior civilization, and just show themselves to them. And say, yes, here we are, and land their ships and say, hi, how are you? But this is greatly discouraged in this, more than that, severely, prohibited in the Star Trek universe. In the Star Trek universe, there is something that is called the Federation, which is an interstellar body that consists also of a union or allied forces of all sorts of species. In that federation, humans, for some reason, are the most dominant because it's just, humans like to think that they are dominant. So whatever, even though it doesn't make much sense. And they did not start the federation. Or, before them, there were actually, the Vulcans, that were very dominant, in something that was the proto-federation. The Vulcans are Spock, Spock, the famous Spock is half Vulcan. in this universe, the Federation is like a fleet. It's like a military fleet, but I mean they try to be peaceful. I mean as much as they can. They don't always succeed, but I mean generally they try to be peaceful. And there is like something that is called the Prime Directive, and the issue of Prime Directive is very very important. And this is like that's why I mean I dedicate so much time like to discuss Star Trek. Not because I'm like particularly a fan like a Trekkie or something like that, but because I think that yes, I mean Gene Roddenberry, that created this franchise, he got it right. Like I mean, there is something that he got very right, like in the way that he constructed his fictional world, and that indeed faster than light travel exists, like in our universe, and that this poses like a question regarding the first contact, and I would say how to deal with this option, and that's why, and like and of course, this answer is, it's like a debatable answer, but it's debated throughout the series until today. 60 years later, they're still debating this issue in the various, installment of the franchise because it's controversial. I mean, by its essence, it's controversial. And I should say right now that the Cherubs, my own species, like I will for just a second now, I will kind of cut this kind of theoretical conversation, but this is like the last time that we jump to our world. The rest of the discussion will be purely theoretical and will deal with literature and cinema and theoretical possibilities. But I feel obliged to say that the stand of the Cherubs, my own species, is that they do not accept the Prime Directive, prima facie, as they say, completely accept it. I mean, they understand the rationale. They have something like that, but not as rigorous as it is in the series. And this is something that, I mean, actually is common in the series itself. Like, this is, mostly it's like, famously this is like the stand of Captain Kirk, in the original series, that he didn't really like, the Prime Directive. So what is the Prime Directive? So now let's get back to, to the fictional world and to theoretical discussion. So what is the Prime Directive? The Prime Directive is אנוכי אדוני אליך, לא יהיה לך אלוהים אחרים על פניי. No, this is my Prime Directive. But what's the Prime Directive in the Star Trek universe? It's the first commandment, of the fleet, of any officer in the fleet. Like, it's the most important, command that is always in effect in the fleet, the Federation fleet. And it goes like that. You are absolutely not allowed to have any kind of contact at all with any civilization that did not discover the faster-than-light engine. Absolutely not allowed. And in order to fulfill this command, as a captain of a starship, you should sacrifice, your own life and the life of everybody in your ship. And their ships, sometimes contain, the Enterprise, it can, be populated, with full staff. There are 1,000 people. And this actually makes sense because it's a big ship. So why shouldn't it contain 1,000 people? Isn't that much, for a ship? So yes, so they have 1,000 people, and they are ordered. And this is the first order, the most important. That's why I call it Prime Directive. The most important, instruction of every officer in the fleet, specifically of the captains of every starship, is that you should absolutely avoid any contact with such civilizations. Even at the cost of your own life and the life of everybody in the ship. Now it should be said that because it's so rigorous and so kind of hard-minded, there are many discussions. There are many episodes, not just the original series, from the 60s, but also all around until now. There are all sorts of, it raises all sorts of, debates. Many times, people, they're not very, they don't like it too much, but it's still in effect. It's a cornerstone of the Star Trek universe. So even though some people, they objected or, they frown upon it, or, they heavily question the morality of this thing, it's still in effect, because it's like the cornerstone of the Federation. And this is, it got the basic rationale, the basic I would say motivation is true. It's true and quite understandable. And that you cannot, I mean, start to interfere with civilization without completely ruining it. Like, I mean, if you interfere with civilization, you can just, I mean, this can go all sorts of ways that you don't want it to go. And we will get back to it in a second. I mean, in a couple of minutes for the discussion of childhood ends. Like the novel of Arthur C. Clarke. So only when the civilization is discovering, the faster than light travel engine, only then they are now approached by. This is now in this universe. I mean, you cannot like in the Star Trek universe you cannot start this kind of faster than light travels without leaving some kind of technological mark, like a trace. And this trace is easily picked up by other civilizations, like those of the Federation, if it's done under close to their space, like in their space. And then I mean they are approached by such a civilization, and then I mean they are offered so and diplomacy starts, and at some point I mean they are offered to join the Federation if it's in their kind of if it seems to be that's something that I mean that it's kind of if it fits them. Just a second.